Hello everybody, welcome to Nadia Collectibles. My name is Nadia. Thank you so much for being here. For today's video, we're going to be going through an extremely humbling experience. As some of you know from my top 5 most expensive figures in my collection, there is one figure in particular that I spent an ungodly amount of money on, and that figure just so happens to be my favorite bunny figure in my collection, Miss Caroline Yuri. Today's video is going to be a comparison between the original Caroline Yuri bunny figure and the newly released tanned Caroline Yuri variant. So for context, I got the original Caroline Yuri bunny back in October of 2022. I had only been collecting bunny figures for a few months. I started collecting bunny figures, like the larger scale figures, back in I think May of 2022, so not a lot of time. From my knowledge back then, native/binding never did recolors or re-releases of any type. So I was always under the impression that if you didn't pay aftermarket on a figure, you were never gonna get it. You had to bite your tongue and buy a figure at a crazy price. Binding, like native side of things, the aftermarket is ridiculous. Caroline Yuri was my ultimate grail figure. She was the bunny figure I had my eyes on since I even got into the hobby. She just, to me, was the ultimate figure to have in a collection. I have zero regrets in buying her at the price I did. I did spend around $950 on her back in October, but I promise you I had no regrets. I think that was probably my most proud purchase at the time. It was an expense I could afford, and I have zero regrets. Honestly, even with her tanned variant coming out, I would still go back in time and do that if I had the mentality that binding figures would never have recolors or re-releases. I think anybody that's seen the presence that Caroline carries in a collection would understand that the aftermarket is so much justifiable for her. She is an absolutely massive bunny figure. She's got so much going on. She's such a beautiful design, and I am quite literally Sakiyama's biggest fan. Sakiyama is the illustrator for Caroline Yuri. Other figures like Mio Blue, which I have in my collection, and the newly released pink twin-tailed bunny figure, which I'm absolutely obsessed with. I just want everything released of Sakiyama. So like I said, at the time that I purchased the original Caroline Yuri bunny, there was no talk of any recolors or re-releases being done by binding. But everything somewhat changed back in November of 2022 when the Ayaka 1/4 scale bunny figure got a Bareleg. That was unheard of. From my knowledge, back when I was collecting bunny figures, the only company that would do bare legs or re-releases would be Freeing. With Freeing bunny figures, it's very common that an original release will get a bare leg eventually in the future. It was very interesting to see that Native had finally done their first bare leg, and that was the Ayaka bunny, which is a very popular bunny that's steadily dropped in price since I think the bare legs release. But yeah, so Ayaka's bunny figure was the first figure to start the trend of being a little bit more cautious when it comes to buying bunny figures in the aftermarket for the native binding side. It definitely opened a lot of eyes and being like, oh, okay, so there's a bare leg of something. Maybe I don't need to pay aftermarket on a figure. Perhaps they might do a bare leg of a figure I really like. So it definitely started that conversation. But the first recolor that binding did was back in January of 2023, and that was the Momoko Uzuki bunny figure. She was not really a sought-after bunny figure. I was kind of surprised when I saw her recolor being done. She had an original black suit, and then the recolor is a white suit. Now, seeing that binding was doing more recolors, it definitely opened a lot of doors for potential Grail figures getting recolors in the future. Following Momoko's release in January, in February, Nanaka got a recolor. So Nanaka is one of my favorite bunny figures in my collection. I have the original release of her. I cannot lie, I really did like the white recolor. White just goes with everything. So somewhat going more into the Grail figure, I guess, territory, because Nanaka is a pretty sought after bunny figure. Her aftermarket is definitely not that bad in comparison to some of the other bunny figures we're going to be talking about in a minute, but it was definitely interesting to see that she was the second to get a recolor following Momoko. Following Nanaka's release, we got a couple more recolors, and that is the Lily and Maria 1/4 scale bunny figures. They're kind of the icons for binding. I am not really a fan of how their bunny figures look. Just for my collection, they're a little bit crazy, but it was definitely interesting to see kind of like how they went about the whole recolor thing, and it was definitely leading to the next game-changing recolor. So the game changer was Olga Discordia's recolor. Olga Discordia was a lot of people's grails, including mine. I had gotten the original release a few months prior to the recolor being released for a not so great price. There was a lot of speculation that she was going to get a recolor following all these different recolors, especially because Olga's aftermarket was probably the worst out of all the binding figures aside from Caroline Yuri. So yeah, that one kind of just shook the world of figure collecting. Seeing that Olga got one, I feel like that definitely made people be like, I'm not spending a single dollar extra on the aftermarket for any other binding figures, because pretty much everything was getting recolors. Seeing if Olga was going to get a recolor, it was inevitable that some of the other 1/4 scales were going to get recolors in the future. And going off from that, the next bunny that got a recolor was my best friend, Miss Caroline Yuri. So Caroline Yuri's recolor went up for pre-order during my birthday month, so that was really exciting. I'd always thought about getting a copy of the Caroline Yuri original version. Whenever I saw it on pre-owned for a somewhat decent price, I was like, ugh. I wanted to check out so bad and just get like multiple of her. As soon as her tan variant went up for pre-order, I pre-ordered it, no questions asked. It did look a little bit not that promising just from the prototype pictures. I remember being like, this looks really, really photoshopped. I did not know it was gonna turn out so well. But like I said, I am Sakiyama's biggest fan, so it didn't even matter if it was a recolor of a figure I already had. It's a recolor of my favorite figure, so yeah. She was up for pre-order on native at around 30,000 yen, so kind of a little bit more expensive than Olga's recolor being released, but reasonably so. Caroline is a bunny figure, so she's got more going on than Olga, especially Olga's just an elf. She doesn't have like the bunny ears and stuff, but it was definitely a fair price in comparison to Caroline Yuri's Aftermarket. So 30,000 yen was the pre-order price for Caroline Yuri's tanned variant. Now that we've kind of gone over the history of the binding figure side of things, let's just go straight into the actual comparison of the two and talk about my favorite bunny figure in my collection, which is Caroline Yuri. We're going to start off by taking a look at their boxes. So this is the original Caroline Yuri's box. It is one of the most gorgeous boxes I've ever seen in my life. It's also very big, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's all the good things. I remember seeing that Olga's recolor got a beautiful, gorgeous, like white redo, I guess. Olga's original box was like a purple, beautiful color. So when I saw that Caroline's was gonna get released soon, I was kind of a little bit hoping for a little bit of a change up in the boxes, just so I could have them like side by side and not kind of get confused, I guess. Saying all that, let's take a look at the recolors box real quick. So this is the original one, and this is the recolors box. So pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is that we see the tanned bunny version line there. So instead of just saying bunny version, it just says tanned. Everything else is exactly the same. The box is the exact same size. The art around the box is exactly the same. One thing to note about getting the recolors or re-releases of binding figures, the recolor will not come with a postcard, which is very unfortunate. I would have loved to see a postcard of Caroline's tan version, kind of just like a redo of the illustration, just with tan skin, lighter hair, and a lighter suit. That would have been really pretty, but unfortunately the recolors do not come with the postcard, which is a little bit sad. Obviously, I'd love to have as many illustrations by Sakiyama as I could, but so is life. So I did, when I got the original version, I did get her postcard. Her postcard is safe for work, so I can show it. Yeah, so this is the original postcard for Caroline. I gotta be very, very careful with this postcard. I don't want to damage it. It is the one figure that I had to make sure I got the postcard for, because I usually don't really care if binding figures don't come with the postcard. Like, I'll buy them off of pre-owned. Missing a postcard doesn't really matter to me, but I really just wanted Caroline Yuri's illustration. So yeah, pretty much the only difference between the two boxes is that one says tanned and the other one does not. So let's move on to the actual figures themselves. Okay, so here are the two Caroline Yuris. They're absolutely stunning side by side. So in terms of the differences, I remember when the prototype went up for the tan variant, I was kind of confused. It looked like really photoshopped, so I didn't actually know what the actual differences were, aside from her obviously having tan skin. It looked like the color of the suit was different in the prototype, and it looked like her hair was maybe a little bit lighter in the prototype pictures. There was no physical prototype, like I couldn't actually see what the figure looked like while I ordered it, or even when it was releasing. The only way I would know what it looked like was when I actually got it in my hands. So that was a little bit of a risk, I guess. So the obvious biggest difference between the two is that the recolor has a nice tan skin, and the original has like the white skin that was in the original illustration for Caroline. So the original Caroline Yuri has more of a darker, deeper pink suit, and her hair color is kind of like a strawberry blonde. I think her skin tone is absolutely gorgeous. I think the color of the suit and the color of her hair really complement the skin tone nicely, and there's not one single flaw about the original release. I have nothing ever bad to say about Caroline Yuri. I never will. There's like no easy way to hold these two up. I could not say which one's better, because I think all the differences between the two complement the skin tone the best way possible, I guess. I don't know how else to explain it. So when I'm looking at the recolor, the tan variant, the hair color for the recolor is a much lighter blonde than the original like strawberry blonde that Caroline Yuri has. And then the next biggest difference is obviously the color of their suit. So the recolor has more of a hot pink, and then the original Caroline Yuri has more of a deeper pink, I guess, tone that works really, really nice with her skin tone. The hot pink works really, really nice with the tan variant. I think it just looks absolutely perfect. The Recolor's lips are kind of more of a nude in comparison to the pink, like kind of lip gloss that the original release has. Another, I guess, really subtle difference between the original release for Caroline Yuri and the Recolor for Caroline Yuri is that the Recolor actually has a more deep brown eyebrow color, which I think works a lot better with the skin tone. Original Caroline Yuri has a more like strawberry blonde kind of eyebrow color, which works nice with her lighter skin tone. So to summarize, the obvious main differences between the two is the color of the hair, the color of the suit, and the color of the skin. Everything else is exactly the same. My biggest concern with Caroline Yuri's Recolor was that she was going to come with quality control issues, or there was going to be like a different mold used for the Recolor. I know a lot of people that got the Olga Discordia Recolor had a lot of QC issues. Actually, there was like a lot of problems with the hair, with like little dents and stuff in the suit, or little chips of the paint everywhere else. And then even there was like noticeably a size difference between the original Olga and the Recolor Olga, which was pretty surprising to me. I feel like if they're just doing a recolor of the suit, because Olga's was just literally just color change of the suit, I would think that they would use the same mold, but it seemed that they used a different mold or different material when making the Recolor for Olga. This was thankfully not the case for Caroline Yuri. When I put them side by side, they are exactly the same in terms of height, in terms of the face sculpt, in terms of the body sculpt, the suit, all that stuff. The only difference is the colors. If anything, I actually had an easier time putting the chest pieces on. I know with my original Caroline Yuri, I had some problems with the little pegs that stick into the suit below her chest, but the Recolor was absolutely perfection in terms of quality and control. There was no scuffing anywhere. Her hair came perfect. There was no bubbling anywhere. She was exactly the same size as Caroline. Literally not a single flaw to this bunny figure, which I'm so thankful for. Regardless of her obviously being cheaper than the original, I wanted her to come perfect. And thankfully she did. I pre-ordered this one straight on native. Zero issues. She was delayed a few times, but I think that was to make sure everything was perfect, especially because native was having a lot of QC issues at the time, putting her up for pre-order. The only thing I guess I struggled on with both of these figures was that like the peg right here to keep her suit up kind of just like doesn't really work that well. Maybe I'm just too scared to like press it further and try and like force it in, but otherwise everything about this Recolor is perfect. Caroline Yuri is like a Gyaru, so I think the tan just works really well for her character, regardless of the original release being a more paler white skin tone. But yeah, having two Caroline Yuris in my collection has always been my dream. I never thought it was going to be like a Recolor. For me, these feel like two completely different figures. Obviously, they're exactly the same in terms of their make and like quality and all that stuff, but the fact that the skin tone is completely different, the hair tone is completely different, the color of the suit is completely different. I feel like that kind of just changes everything. If it was just a change in the color of the suit, obviously I still probably would have gotten it, but for me, these feel like just like two completely different figures, and you can't go wrong buying either of them. So if you're on the fence of buying Caroline's original release has definitely dropped a bit in the aftermarket since the Recolor went up for pre-order. I feel like if anything, the Recolor is going to get more expensive. It's definitely preference based as well. For me, I prefer Caroline Yuri, so it doesn't really matter what colors of skin she has. To me, she's perfect. Her actual design is just what I love the most. I feel like in general, Caroline carries the same presence regardless of the skin tone. I think like I just said, I feel like you just can't go wrong with either of the two. Obviously, the Recolor is around 30,000 yen. The original is, I think, still in the 40s, 50s, 60s. So she's still quite expensive regardless of her Recolor going up for pre-order. So I feel like it's up to you which one you think is better. And yeah, it just feels unreal to finally have two of them and not have to break the bank, I guess, to get a second Caroline of the original release. She's everything I expected and more. If anything, the Recolor turned out way better than I thought it was going to. So this is just such a perfect figure for anybody's collection. And I think if you haven't picked up the original and you are trying to be more cautious on how much you spend, the Recolor is just as good and probably will make you just as happy. All I gotta say is I love Caroline so much, and I'm so glad I finally have the tan variant in my collection to be able to display them side by side as if they're twin sisters or just best friends. Thank you so much for watching my video today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to as well, and I'll see you guys later. Goodbye!